Hi, good morning. Welcome to Education Matters, NJSBA podcast. I'm your host, Ray Pinney. This is a podcast where we talk about education issues in New Jersey. We talk about some best practices and just what's going on in the state of education in New Jersey. Today, we're going to be talking about listening to the student voice, which is, I think is very important. With me is the superintendent from the Brigantine School District, Glenn Robbins. Welcome, Glenn. How are you?
I'm great, Ray. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate this.
Oh, my pleasure. First of all, tell us a little bit about the school district you're in, Brigantine.
Yeah, it's in Atlantic County. We are located right next to Atlantic City, New Jersey. School district is a pre-K to 8 district, and I've been here for roughly about 6 years now.
Okay. So, as I said in the opening, we're going to talk about listening to the student voice. That can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, probably even superintendents and teachers and principals. What does listening to the student voice mean to you? And then how does that tie into your student podcast?
I think student voice is everything. I think a lot of times we talk about changing schools, we talk about changing systems, we talk about policies, we talk about so many different things in schools, but so often we neglect to ask the number one clientele, which is our students. So for us, we always want curious minds of what our students want and how do they want to continue to improve the school. And we work with them. And by giving them a student voice allows them to rise up to the occasion, learn soft skills that they usually do not learn. And what came from this is a bunch of different ideas over the last couple of years. And one of them was student podcasting. I remember a young lady 3 years ago actually said, hey, what if we had podcasting? And what if we could have our own podcasting studios and our channels? So we decided to say, you know what? Why not? Podcasting is such a fundamental way of life nowadays. When you're driving in your car or on a run, whatever it may be, podcasts are there. So our kids wanted to have more of a voice. So we sat down with them and started to sketch out what this would look like. And then we had to look at it from administratively. How do we set this up? How do we, what technology do we need? What does a podcast look like? Who's overseeing it? Who's involved? When does this take place during the school day? Is it graded? Is it not graded? So we had to sit down and talk about a lot of those functionalities. But ultimately, we knew the experience we were trying to create was podcast for kids. And I'll tell you what started out as a pipe dream a couple years ago has exploded into multiple podcastings in our school. So we're rather excited about it, and they can all be found on Spotify.
Oh, great. Well, actually, a lot of the things that you were discussing before you started, I think we'll be getting into. First of all, what grades are you looking at that are doing it? You go up to 8th grade. Is it just 7th, 8th graders, or what grades do they get involved?
Yeah, they start in 5th grade. We actually had 2 years ago, we had a podcast where a 2nd grade teacher was doing podcasts with each kid and then sending it home to their parents. And that was rather amusing and heartwarming at the same time, listening to 2nd graders talk. But for us, it's 5th to 8th grade. To give you an example, we have some 5th graders this year who started that met with one of the individuals from the Philadelphia Eagles organization. The gentleman had won national accolades for his PR and marketing, and one of the family members knew him and reached out and said, hey, would you be willing to come in? And the kids got to interview somebody that had a Super Bowl ring. So they were really excited about that. We have other kids who work with our a couple of marketing teams on the island. One in particular is Brigantine Living, that showcases so many great things going on here in the community. And they do a 10-minute segment with a business owner or whatever it may be, a leader in the town, and they talk about for 10 minutes what's going on in that particular area. And then obviously it works its way up to 8th grade, and we've had 7th grade girls who've interviewed Olympians, World Cup winners for soccer. We've had Super Bowl champions. We've had world-renowned keynote speakers. We've had soccer players. You name it, we've had it. Because the coolest thing about this is the kids are the ones that reach out and set up these interviews and really push it forward saying, hey, would you like to be on my podcast? Here's what we're doing, and here's how we amplify it out. And I know you just put the picture up of the podcast studio. That was something of fruition that came to a couple of years ago. But basic microphones, a TV setup for virtual, And then they had the graphics and the artist designed from a local artist in town, Dunes Gallery, and the kids helped design that layout. They loved the old school speaker, and they said, let's add some pizzazz to this. So when you walk in the studio, you know you're in an actual studio, and you got some comfortable seating in the corners too, right? So guests or kids can sit in those comfortable chairs with the mics that are boom mics that can move around. So we give a lot of freedom and autonomy to our kids to do some really successful and great things.
Now, there's a lot of work that goes into a podcast. It's not just the camera goes on. There's a lot of preparation. You kind of talked about getting the speakers, which we'll get to in a minute, because it seemed like from what you said, all hands on deck and trying to find, it could be someone in the community, it could be someone out. But did you have a supervisor or someone or is it an individual teacher? Because that's probably one of the first questions you have to decide is how's that going to be overseen?
Yeah, great question. They do this during our ungraded class period time. So this is the cool part about it. These kids are working on it during their lunchtime, their recess time, and during our flex period time, which is an ungraded 45-minute class. And they work with our teacher that oversees our media studio. She comes in and makes sure kids are on task, but the kids are the ones to do all the work. They're the ones that'll reach out to particular guests that they're interested in. They're the ones that do all the recordings, and they work with our chief technology officer. He's helped them out along the way with some technical issues here and there. But then the kids are editing as well, and then they share it with the teacher, and the teacher reviews it before they publish it on Spotify, and then it's out to the world. So it's pretty much all student voice led from the very start to the very end. And the cool part about that is, right, I know AI is such a big function in everybody's minds right now. Mm-hmm. These kids are using it. So if they didn't know who Ray was, they knew of him, but they were going to interview him. They're using AI. They're going into Gemini or Brisk or whatever we're using and saying, all right, give me a biography of who Ray is. All right, we know the basic things we can find online, but is there anything else you can tell us about it? Now, based on his biography, what are 6 or 7 questions you would ask him? So they're generating the question saying, all right, this question good or bad, whatever, and they're using that. And then they also use it for their editing. For years before, people in podcasting had to get like different editors and so forth. These kids are using AI to do all the editing practicalities and then pumping it right on the Spotify. So, this is something they're truly involved with a basic teacher that oversees them at an ungraded class period time because of their excitement that they have for it.
Do they volunteer for this, or is this like something where well, I'm sure you probably have so many that are volunteering, because to me, it would be fun if I don't care what grade I'm in. It would be fun to do. Do they like rotate who's doing the editing, who's behind the microphone? Do they have to rotate so they see all aspects of it?
Yeah, so it's just like when they do media on our YouTube channel. There are some kids who love to speak, and there are some kids who do not. They'd rather do the technical aspect of that. So it's pretty interesting. Like I know there's a couple kids who, they don't always do as much talking, but they'd rather do all the technical editing. They'd rather do the logo. And that was pretty cool. I saw a lot of them using AI to design their logos for their podcast that goes on to Spotify. So you click on that as well. That was what they were excited about. Now you ask if everybody's involved. No, because not every kid wants to be part of the podcasting. So we lay it out to everybody. We do an introduction to it all in the very beginning of the year. Here's what it consists of. Here's what our hopes and goals are, that you at least get on there at least monthly or bi-weekly, whatever it may be, to get on there, what works to their schedule and what they want to achieve. We have some kids that talk about just video games and new movies. We have other ones that talked about female empowerment. We had other ones that talked about sports, other ones I mentioned earlier about what's going on in the community, but they're the ones that want to do it. And we've had some families who tried to push it on their kids to do it, and the kids are like, sorry, Mom, I just don't want to do this. So we don't force it on them. We give them an opportunity, and if they want to partake, they jump in and we support them along the way.
Now, do the grades work together, or is it like the 5th graders do their own podcast and then the 8th graders have their own podcast, or is it across the grades can be mixed?
Yeah, so far it's basically the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and 8th are all within each other. But we have seen, especially this past year, a lot of the older ones mentoring the younger ones. So we had some fourth graders last year that were super excited to get involved for this upcoming year. So we had eighth grade girls that were trying to mentor them to show them how to truly use the system and what their podcast could be. Who's their target audience? What is the message they want to get across? What are the questions you really want to get to the bottom of when you interview somebody? And, why do you want a podcast? What is the purpose of your podcast? So they asked some pretty technical questions, at such a young age. But I love the fact that they were mentoring each other and helping each other out. And that's the other cool aspect. When the studio is being used here and there, they work with each other. They understand that there's a time restraints and so forth. So we have multiple other computers elsewhere. We have other platforms we use. But when they're in the studio, they all work very cohesively with each other.
And you mentioned AI, but from listening to what you're saying, there's a lot of skills that I think they're taking in. Just that whole discussion of who's doing what is critical thinking skills. But what are some of the other skills that they're mastering that maybe people are not thinking about?
I think, to me, I love getting emails from these kids. When they say, "Hey, Mr. Robbins, we got a guest. We want to interview him, but it might miss some of our ELA time." The way they write it out is rather impressive, regardless of their grade level. I think another impressive thing that I've seen in person is when the kids will go up to an adult, introduce themselves, explain what their podcast is, and then ask them to be part of the show. They are confident, they are strong, they're looking in the eyes, they're shaking hands. These type of skills of building that, are so necessary in the game of life, to be able to talk to a functioning human being instead of a computer or just hiding behind a screen. These kids have the confidence and the skill set to go up to somebody. And you can see it has completely changed who they were from the start to the end. And you're seeing young adults, and I think, to me, I think that's an awesome thing to see, the confidence level, the belief in who they are, and the belief in what their podcast is, and they're trying to get a message out. I couldn't speak more highly about it. And then obviously you mentioned the AI. They're using technical abilities. They're using ELA abilities because they're talking about, what questions have to be, the editing, just like my name's on the bottom of the screen there now. They got to make sure the person's name and everything's correct that they're doing. When they put it out as well, they have to be an intro to it, so they're doing all these different standards. And then you got to think about math, right? You got to think about what is the time restraints? How long is each question? What happens if somebody's like me and they're talking too long? How do they continue to push forward to another question or whatever it may be? But ultimately, it is the confidence and the skill set of a human being having a conversation with another human being. It's simply surreal.
As you're talking, and I'm thinking about it, they also have to kind of form a team.
Yep.
And work well with each other, I guess, because it's not a one-man show or one-woman show. So they have to kind of form relationships. Are these kids friends all together, or they all have the same interests, but they may not necessarily be best friends outside of school, but this might help them come together a little bit better?
Yeah, 2 or 3 of the groups were very much what you just said. They had an interest level together. They were somewhat associates or friends, but they weren't true friends. And then they joined up together. And then you have other ones that are just friends and say, "Hey, let's do this together." But what we've realized is that, while they're doing this with the adults and the podcasting and so forth, they also have internal conflicts here and there. They're kids. Mm-hmm. So we have to lead them along the way saying, all right, what's the issue? Is somebody editing too much not to your liking? Are you cutting out on your voice? Could you sound better? Or it's just maybe typical kid drama, but we help walk them through it, saying that your teammates rely on you to get the job done. And I think that's something that we've enjoyed along the way too, trying to guide these children to understand that they're going to work with people in their future, whatever job mm-hmm. function, and they got to know how to figure out things along the way.
Yeah, it's not just kids drama. Adults have drama too. Just from my experience anyway. And maybe I give the most drama. I don't know. So I like the picture of your studio. I like your studio, the backdrop and everything else. How did that come about? Because I'm sure when you got to the school as a superintendent, there was no studio set up.
No, it wasn't. It was actually an old closet. So it was near our media studio that we have. Mm-hmm. So we have a room that does all the conversations of what the shows would be. Then there's another work room, and then this was an old room that was just basically a storage area off to the side of our commons, which is our library. That's why you see the windows with the shades down. That can actually look out to the whole library, so people can watch the shows. It's funny, some kids are very confident in who they are and they don't mind people watching in. Other ones prefer the shades shut. I think it's just a preference on who kids are. But we said, all right, if we're going to do this, we have to set up a space for these kids. Now, look, the technology that we purchased is not the creme de la creme. I'm in a district that continues to lose state funding and so forth. So we have to be very frugal and understanding of what technologies we can get. So we started with just basically iPads, and the kids were interviewing in different classrooms or hallways, and they were just picking up too much sound interference in the background. And then they were trying to work where the TV studio was. And then we found out there was just too much scheduling conflicts between the live media and the podcasters. So we said, look, we need to put together a room for these kids. It's similar to like if we're starting a football program, or like when we started our esports program a couple of years ago, we designed and built an esports arena just for those kids. We knew we have a select clientele of just podcasters, and they need to be supported and feel that they have a space to be who they want to be. And we said, let's create an experience for them when they walk in. It goes, wow. So this way, we put a TV on the wall, a basic camera, a couple different mics, a TriCaster hooked onto a screen. And these kids can do the interviews in this room, whether it's in these soft, comfortable chairs with the boom mics or around the table, and or virtually. And I think that's something not everybody can make it down to Brigantine, New Jersey, and or they set up these meetings, and these people are well renowned that they're traveling so much that they'll zoom in from like a hotel room or wherever they're speaking at or wherever they may be. So we built that virtual function in, and then that way it records. Some kids love having the video like we are right now, plus the sound that goes out later. Some do not. So we leave it on to them. Like we had one group that did an incredible interview, and they loved the audio, but they did not like the way they looked on the video. So they tried to delete the videos before we could see it. And we were so proud of them, saying, look, you did a great job. You realize what you just did. You met with so-and-so. So it's also building up their self-esteem a little bit too. But each group is different. But basic furniture, basic boom mics in here, basic technology, and then we hook up, like I said, with AI and Spotify, and we really make it work. And then this year, and at the end of the year last year, we used a company called Soundtrap, which does a lot of the functionality of editing as well. And that makes it easier for a kid. You and me are working on the same project or a podcast. You and I can do it from each other's houses. So you're doing it at home, I'm doing it at home. We can do the editing right there. So it definitely helps speed up the programming.
I would imagine this must be, if I was a kid, if you're involved in this, you're very enthusiastic about it. Does it help them throughout does this enthusiasm for school maybe carry over to their other academic subjects? Oh
yeah, without a doubt. And I think that's the cool part. The other teachers are seeing it now more and more. I share out their broadcast on emails with all the teachers, say, hey, check this out. Listen to who they interviewed. Particularly in their ELA teachers, talking about like their public speaking and so forth. Very excited about that. But yeah, it's something that didn't just branch out to just the teachers. It branched out to the community. Like I said, we have the Brigantine Living that wants to come in and work with these kids and help them train even more, to be public speakers or influencers or whatever it may be.
But that's a career now. So,
It is. So, and we actually had an influencer come in and help at the beginning of this to talk about what they do and what they don't do, to build an audience. So I think it's caught fire around not only the school district, but also the community. We've had some local groups around the state or nationally who've been part of it, where they interviewed, particularly our girls. We had a couple of national groups interviewed 3 young ladies who were doing the female empowerment, and vice versa. So it's pretty cool to see these kids go from just the basic functionality of their podcasting studio to national.
I hope when they go to high school or at least college later on that there's an opportunity to do something like this as well.
Well, we also show them, Ray, that they can do it without us.
That's
Yeah,
true.
they can do it with their own technology. We allow them to take their channel with them if they'd like to, or we give them the confidence to say, "Go ahead, you know how to do it now. You did it in sixth, seventh, eighth grade. You can definitely do it in high school."
Great. Now, if a school district's looking to start this, which, I'm sure I know there's others going on, what are some recommendations you would give to get started? Because, you do have to go get started somewhere.
Yeah, great question. I think you survey the kids, you ask the kids, and then I think you have to also talk to your chief technology officer. Do you have any iPads around? Do you have any basic microphones? Do you have any furniture that you could set up a little studio, whatever it may be? And ask the CTO, do we have the bandwidth in the building to be able to support this? Do we have the recording areas to be able to support this? And do we set it up in our own school channels? So when the kids do this, they go through our school accounts. It's not on like Ray's and Glenn's private account at home. They're on a school account, so we can oversee that, for a couple different reasons. Once you survey the kids, then you bring them in and say, all right, what does a podcast look like to you? And start having those conversations. And a lot of the time, they don't understand the full complexities of it. They just think you're going to be an influencer or be somebody on YouTube, and that's it. So you have to start to, bring in professionals from the outside like we did, talking about what are your questions? Who's your target audience? Why do you have this type of podcast? What is your vision and mission for this podcast going forward? In the future, are you going to have sponsorships? And if you have sponsorships, do they align with who you are and ethically and morally? So you have those conversations with the kids, and then you also talk about the technological aspect of it. There's got to be an editor or two. We have to agree that these are different functionalities as a team that we have to partake in order to make this successful. So I think ultimately talk with your CTO to see if you have the bandwidth or any equipment you can help out. Basically starting out the iPads and or phones. I know that's a big thing, or people don't want to use phones, but phones are a great way to use podcasting on a traveling level. You're not always going to be able to bring the big boom mics with you and everything else. So what technology will you use? Is there a space for them? And then ultimately, as a leader, what's your vision for the program? Mine,
Mm-hmm.
I love the PR and marketing aspect that the kids are getting out there and learning to speak with other adults. And I love for the fact that they're advertising our school to see it as true student voice. You and I, Ray, can talk to we're blue in the face about what we're doing in a school district, but these kids are actually sharing it.
Yeah, that makes that's kind of creating your branding for your school district, is the kids are creating it, and people can see firsthand what your students are like.
Right.
Before we're getting towards the end, a couple more questions. One, what are some other ways we can do the student voice? Because actually, this kind of came from students. Are there any other ways that we can look for the student voice, or that you try?
Yeah, a great question. We've revamped all the furniture in the classrooms and the cafeterias based on what the kids have recommended. And we do a lot. We did that in the very beginning, where we brought together different groups and so forth, administrators, teachers, and kids. And we had the teachers and they had the kids sit on these different types of furniture that they were sitting in every day. And the teachers would be like, wow, my back really hurts sitting on this. And I was like, oh, imagine being a kid. So we revamped a lot of the furniture, revamped a lot of the learning spaces. Kids like to write, especially the little ones. So we do writable desk. The kids absolutely love that now, that they can write on their desk and not get in trouble. Obviously, it has to be a dry erase marker. But that's spacing of the school, what it could be. Another couple of programming came out of it was, the media studio. The kids wanted to really develop that for the YouTube channel. Another one is we started an ASL class, on top of Spanish that we have. The kids really wanted to do American Sign Language. And we had such buy-in. I was lucky to find a great teacher to take that program and run with it. So a lot of the small parts or integral parts of the school come from the kids. This design behind me, this mural on the wall, we have multiple murals throughout the building that the kids work with the artists saying, we'd like to see this in there. We wouldn't like to see this in there, which makes it their school. Same thing for the bathroom, same thing for multiple classrooms, and we talk to the kids a lot, like what's something good going on, what's not going on, whatever it may be technology wise. what's a struggle? And we realized that some kids were not charging their devices and bringing them to school, which would then put a damper on a teacher. So we're like, all right, what can we do different? Like, all right, like put a charging device in the back. So now we have charging stations in the back, so no kid can ever claim that they don't have a Chromebook anymore. They plug it in and they sit in the back of the room. So a lot of the times it's just simply asking the kids, hey, what are you seeing from your level? And of course, there's some wacky recommendations. Let's be honest, right?
Right.
And we
Well,
say,
that can come from adults too.
right, it does. But at the same time, we talk with them and say, yeah, we can't do that. But here's what we can maybe do.
Okay. Uh, the other thing is school, we're recording this. It's the end of summer. School will be opening in a little over a week. How do you get it started? I'm sure there's some kids who are coming back who are doing it in 6th and 7th grade and want to do it again this year. But how do you roll it out through the beginning of the year? Do you do a new recruiting process?
I think it's a little bit of both. Some people forget what they did last year and or summertime. They've had the beach on their mind the whole time. So we'll just do an announcement, here and there and saying, all right, anybody that's interested in podcasting, please come to this particular room to meet with the teacher. And then we're going to start talking about what it looks like again, what the layout's going to be, one of the time periods going to be, and so forth, and just getting a refresher. But I know there's already a couple kids who are already clamoring at the bit to get back in here to start recording. So those kids will be able to help and amplify the voice to others.
Okay, great. So, we're talking about listening to the student voice. And so, Glenn, I believe everything you say, but I still want to hear the student voice. So I think if down the road, after you have it set up, would it be okay to have your kids on the podcast so I could get their feedback as to what they think about being podcasters?
Right. Right. We're going to take it a step further. I love the idea. I'm just thinking of this. You come visit us. If we have to do it virtually, we'll do it virtually. But if you can come visit us, and particularly if it's around school board time and you want to bring some individuals from school boards or other school boards across the state, we'll gladly host you. We'll have people watching the windows, or they can partake in the video and the podcasting as well. I think the more eyes that get on this, the possibilities are endless for all these other kids across the state to really flourish. So yeah, that's my challenge to you, my friend. Not just
I shouldn't have opened up a can of worms with you. I should have known better. No, actually, that would be
friends.
Actually, from my preference, this is virtual, and look, it wouldn't happen, but without it. But I do like the in-person podcast, seeing the person that you're interviewing, or if I'm interviewed with the students, I think there's a chemistry there that sometimes comes out that doesn't. It's good, like you and I kind of know each other, but if it's the first time you're meeting someone virtually, it's a little bit more difficult. But I think, I would definitely go down there, and I could see what we can, maybe we talk. They can interview and find out what the role of the school board members. I'll bring a board member with me or something.
Yeah, please. Bring some friends. I would
So
love
you and I will be in contact. We'll, I'll drive down there. That's not a problem. It's a nice place. Any other final thoughts you have on the podcasting? Do any of the kids think that they want to become something like this in communications?
I do. I know a couple of them went to high school and they're thriving now. Their parents continue to tell me about how much they've really grown from where they started to where they are now. And it's exciting. Some of them are doing commentary now for the local football teams or baseball teams, whenever they can get into it. So they're excited about just being in public speaking. But I'll leave it at this. Podcasting is really opening doors for a couple of different reasons. Number one, the public speaking aspect of it has really grown exponentially for our kids. I cannot speak highly enough about that. When I see a kid talking to an adult about what their podcast is and why they want to be on the show, it's really helped bring the camaraderie to our school district, and to the community, that we're PRing, we're marketing, we're branding, whatever you'd like to call it, from a true student voice level. And that's ultimately what matters at the end of the day.
Okay. I'd like to thank Glenn Robbins, the superintendent of Brigantine, as he talked about his student podcasters. I'm very excited. We made an agreement that somehow we'll work together down the road very quickly. We're not going past the end of October.
Sounds good.
Because I want to see these kids. And my other feeling is that these kids build their confidence up. And once you have confidence in one aspect, it can translate across into other aspects of their lives.
Right.
So, well, thank you, Glenn. As always, it was interesting talking to you. And I hope everyone enjoyed this program.